These are two different controllers for Beatmania 2DX, the mother of all rhythm games. One of them costs $30, and the other one costs $300. Yeah! This one is the Konami original controller from all the way back in 2000, designed to be used with the PlayStation 2. The buttons use rubber membranes, and the turntable is a lot smaller than the arcade, and pretty much everything is made out of plastic. Then this is the DJ DAO Phoenixwan Plus, a premium controller that tries to match the feel of the arcade controls as much as reasonably possible. And then DAO also threw in a bunch of RGB lighting on top of that because it's a PC gaming peripheral, that's pretty much what you'd expect. So what are these like to use? Well, starting off with the PS2 controller, it's honestly not that bad. Like sure, it has a limit, but as long as you don't push beyond that, it's perfectly cromulent. The buttons feel okay and the turntable works just as you'd expect it to. I actually find that on this turntable it's a lot easier to do the pinky scratch technique compared to an arcade-sized turntable, although that does come with the drawback of making it harder to transition to an arcade turntable when you eventually do, because you will want to upgrade eventually. My take is that this is a good recommendation for beginners to the game. I didn't really notice many of its issues until I got about to level 7, level 8, and I was able to just barely push 9s on it, but once you get to that level, you will want to upgrade. Here's the thing, right? That means that the first 7 levels of the game are perfectly accessible, and honestly, 2DX is such a hard game, you're gonna want that cheaper entry point just to figure out if you like it or not. So far, this is all sounding really good. There must be some kind of downside, right? Yeah, there is. Let's get into that. Let's start off with the buttons. Membranes just don't feel as good to hit as micro switches. They can feel a lot heavier, which means they take a lot more force to press down. Now, when showing them like this, it probably doesn't seem like too much of a difference, but trust me, in gameplay, you will notice a difference that small. Now, you'll notice the start button is here, which for changing speed in the middle of gameplay is actually quite good. It's good for changing speed in the middle of gameplay when you don't want to. I ended up just unbinding it altogether and using my keyboard for the start button because of how often that happened. Another issue is that the buttons have a tendency to get stuck down, which can obviously be a massive issue during gameplay. For what it's worth, I've noticed this issue more as I've used the controller over time, but at the same time, I don't know. I've seen people trying to fix this with mods all the way back when the PS2 was still relevant, so who knows. And speaking of the PS2, that is honestly this controller's Achilles heel. It was designed for the PS2, it works best on PS2. You can use it on PC, but you're gonna have some issues. The least consequential way this manifests is the turntable sends a digital signal, so you won't get that precise analog control in the menus. Not a huge deal for me, I was fine just using keyboard keys to get around that. You're gonna have a much bigger issue trying to actually get it to connect to a PC in the first place. Now there's two different problems to sort out here, and people get these kind of confused, so I'm going to try and address this. The main issue is polling rate. Effectively, how many times the computer checks to see what buttons are being pressed. Effectively, think of it as frame rate for your controller. Most of the cheap PS2 controller to USB adapters have absolutely abysmal polling rates. Now this would be an issue for any game, but remember, the most precise judgment in 2DX is about 16 milliseconds. So if the game is only receiving any input, about 40 milliseconds, yeah, you can see the problem. So here's an example, right? Check out Gamble, a song all the way back from 2DX's first style that, for whatever reason, had incredibly bugged timing windows that were so busted that you basically had to be super precise and get P rates consistently. And because for some reason Konami is evil, they added an even harder difficulty to it later on, where you basically had to hit exactly perfect or else you would get goods, which in 2DX are like the worst judgment you can get while still hitting the note. Why am I telling you all this? Because if you get a cheap USB to PS2 controller adapter, literally every single song will feel like you're playing Gamble with the hardest timing. Okay, got it. I gotta make sure to get an adapter with a decent polling rate. What's the other problem that I'm hearing around? Truth be told, this second thing isn't nearly as much of a problem, but hey, if it was enough to bug Clue, then I might as well address it here. If you get one of the regular adapters not designed for a 2DX controller, it'll just take all the signals from the PS2 controller port and slam them into a regular USB game controller, because it's expecting you to use a DualShock 2. Obviously, the 2DX controller is mapped very differently to that, specifically like this. So if you use it with a regular adapter, your PC will see those on a regular gamepad layout. And honestly, that's not really a big deal for me. If you're playing 2DX Infinitas, a BMS client, or IMGUI, then you'll just be able to remap the controls to work just fine. I was able to use this exact setup when I was first learning on 2DX Infinitas. But what if you did want a specific custom adapter just for the PS2 2DX controllers? There are solutions for this. First off, the Beatmania project, which hooks into all the raw inputs from the controller and sends them over USB through something like an Arduino, bypassing all the PS2-ness of it. The other option is making a custom PS2 to USB adapter, so you keep all the PS2 stuff, but then it reinterprets it and sends it out as a PS2 controller. This also would likely use an Arduino or a PiPico or something similar. However, both of these solutions do require a certain level of expertise in wiring and all that kind of stuff. It's not the kind of thing I can recommend to a beginner unless they're also confident in electronics. I was lucky enough to order this custom PS2 to USB adapter, and it works perfectly for me. Even the turntable issue in the menus is fixed, but I got really lucky there. It's not something you can just go out and buy like I did. Of course, there is the option of just sticking with the PS2 games on the PS2 hardware, but I don't know how much I can seriously recommend that in current year. Look, I love the old 2DX games as much as anyone. They have so much source, but they have so much jank, and I would not recommend learning on those. 2DX is a hard enough game already. I don't want to make your learning process even harder, unless you're a rhythm game masochist, in which case, go for it. One last thing to bring up is the price of this thing can vary wildly. If you're, say, in the US, and you go on eBay, you might see someone listing it for $100. Don't pay that. Go on a Japanese auction site, use a proxy, and then get it shipped there. It'll cost like, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 yen plus shipping fees. Now, if I was smart, I would have done some kind of sponsor integration here with a proxy service, but I didn't. Oops. So that's the cheap PS2 controller. What do you get with the premium experience? Well, native compatibility for one. Just plug this in and it'll work with pretty much anything you can throw at it. And the hardware? Pretty much anything that can feel nicer does feel nicer. This could very easily be an endgame controller where you wouldn't really want or need anything better than this. Besides, it's hefty, but not total overkill. It has space on it for everything you'd want, but not a whole lot extra, and there's also loads of lights, just everywhere. This obviously isn't beneficial for the gameplay experience, but it does look cool and is pretty much a prerequisite for any PC gaming accessory these days. This light strip here and some lights around the turntable are reactive RGB lights. Effectively, they change depending on what you're doing in the game. And all of the buttons have a single light, which you can't change the color of on the fly, but you can swap around if you want to, which is what I've done. Speaking of buttons, the ones you get on this are basically the same as an arcade cab, give or take. The ones that you get by default look basically the same, but they're made with slightly cheaper materials. But you wouldn't really notice that unless you're a really hardcore player, and realistically, in a video explaining what this controller even is, you don't need me to explain the difference between Sanwa and Omron and the micro switch weights. Like, if you already know that, you don't need me to tell you about it, and if you don't know what that means, you're at a level where it really won't affect you. And even then, if you want that exact arcade perfect feel, check what your arcade is actually using for its parts, because springs? You can change the weight of those, you can have it feel different. That kind of stuff can vary depending on which arcade you're going to, and even from cab to cab. Truth be told, I got this one used and never thought to check what parts were inside it, because at my play level, which is intermediate, you really don't notice those small differences. While I'm here, I'll say both controllers allow you to seamlessly switch your layout from the player 1 side to the player 2 side. It's really neat how they handle it. Both are just like kind of hot swappy. And in the case of the Phoenixwan, it's also very easy to get inside and fiddle with all the parts for the buttons and stuff. So, the verdict is that the $30 controller is obviously worse than the $300 controller. You could have guessed that as soon as you finished reading the thumbnail text. The actual thing is it worth buying the more expensive controller? That can really vary. Mostly on how much money you have and how much you value the game. 2DX can be a very intimidating game, so I can definitely understand the appeal of wanting to practice it at home before you go to the arcade to play it. That is, if there's even an arcade near you. A lot of people don't have those, so yeah, getting a controller does make sense, but if a couple months in you just decide you really don't vibe with this game, which is totally fair, I can't imagine that the buyer's remorse combined with the gamer rage will be a particularly good experience. But if you've already got a lot of experience playing the game, maybe in the arcade, and you know for certain that you really want to practice this and get better at it, this can serve as a good long-term hobby investment. Think of it like buying a musical instrument or a skateboard or something like that. Sure, the initial cost's quite high, but you're going to get years of use out of this. And hey, the resale value on them isn't too bad either. I don't know your personal financial situation, but given this economy, it's probably not going to be that good right now. So I'm not going to weigh in on whether it's worth spending $300 on a rhythm game controller. Not to mention, oh my gosh, the price of shipping is insane for these things because they're so heavy. But hey, I got mine used. I didn't have to worry about any of that. And honestly, that's the route I'd recommend for this kind of thing. Try joining some local community groups, Discord servers, or just chatting to people in the arcade and see if you can find any deals. And hey, while you're there, maybe try and chat to people about this hobby too. It's a social thing. So that's the end of the video. I hope you found this useful. Quickly before I go, I would like to take a second to shill. Thank you to these people for giving me money. If you too would like to give me money, then you can go to the link I have where you can give me money and get such cool, awesome perks as your name here and maybe video previews. Wow, that's so cool. I would give myself money to get those perks if I wasn't the one receiving the money. Okay, thank you for hearing me out and maybe giving me money. If you don't want to, that is also fair. I will be doing videos whenever my chronic fatigue lets me. Until next time, take care, gamers. I really like that as an ending. The video's over now. You can leave.